In the modern traditional Buddhism, it is always necessary to become a novice, regardless your age. So even if somebody is 50 or 70, in Myanmar at least, they will always be given first novice ordination, and then in the worst case, after 5 minutes, they will get the full ordination. So I think you can imagine that 5 minutes is not much for training. And now for the little novices, they would be perhaps fully ordained if the Buddha had allowed it. It's because the Buddha didn't allow it that the novices, those who are under 20, are not allowed to be fully ordained before they are 20. In Myanmar, however, they distinguish these two, those who are ordained as in their childhood and those who are ordained after some time as adults. They distinguish it as the so-called small and pure and the so-called forest retreated. So small and pure, it means that they are ordained when they were young, and they are pure because they never engaged in sexual intercourse. Now those who retreated to the forest, that relates to the fact that certainly they must have had been married, so they enjoyed sensual pleasures, and then they retreated from them. Then they abandoned them. That's a better word. So small and pure, or let's say little and pure, are traditionally, but not in reality, traditionally they would be given more respect. Those who retreated to the forest are still given a lot of respect if they meditate and follow all the rules, but they're not expected to know the Buddha's teachings as well. Because those who become novices in their childhood are expected to learn the Buddha's scriptures to great detail. And therefore, people, if they want to know more about the Buddha's scriptures more in detail, although they would approach a monk who became a monk at a later age, they would always trust a lot to a monk who has been a monk since their early childhood, because they dedicated to the studies so many years. So you could say that maybe the studying is the preparation. Okay. Yes, maybe. I'm not sure. In the Buddha's teachings, we do not see this as a requirement, In the Buddhist scriptures, it is suggested that if somebody becomes a monk young or a novice young, then they first start with scriptures. That is specifically suggested, but it's not a requirement. And we can see very young novices, who became fully enlightened in the scriptures when they were 7 years old. So this, I think, is remarkable, but in today Myanmar, I don't think you will see a young monk, a novice who is less than 20 years, or especially less than 15 or 10 years, who would not be following an officially recognized educational, curriculum, either monastic or secular. They will, I have never seen an exception. They will always follow either monastic or secular education. Secular is where you are, learning mathematics and Burmese language and grammar and biology and history and that kind of thing. Monastic is when you are learning Pali language and the Buddha's teachings. Now the second question was, what about the ordination process? So ordination process is very complicated if you had to do it somewhere totally else than in Myanmar, because you need to have the proper ordination hall, or let's call it the proper ordination site. So ordination site needs to follow many rules that we would be here for long time before I would tell you all of the rules. So let's just say that ordination hall, ordination site requires a lot of rules, and there is a lot to do before that place can be recognized as an ordination site. But if you ever thought we have no time to prepare any ordination site, then you just take a boat, take it on a river, go into the middle of a river or into the middle of a naturally arisen lake or river and ordain there, and it's fine. The ordination, however, requires that there are at least 5 monks present at the ordination ceremony. And if it is at the Buddha's region, then there must be at least 10 monks. This is reflecting the number of monks in the Buddha's time. So, of course, at the time of the Buddha, there where the Buddha stayed, there were much more monks than elsewhere. So in the it's known as the so-called central area, but it's somewhere, in the northern central India. There it would be necessary to have 10 monks present for ordination. Everywhere else you need to have 5. But because it's very difficult to make sure that these 5 are pure, usually 10 monks or 20 or 30 monks would attend, comprise the audience. And then an array of complicated steps starts. So number 1, the requirements need to be checked. The adept needs to fulfill several requirements, such as they need to have their rope, upper rope, under rope, double rope. They need to have their bowl. Only if they have all these 4 things, they're allowed to be ordained. The monks are not allowed to lend him something, because then it would cause problems after the ordination. Then the person who's going to be ordained must fulfill some bodily characteristics, which make sure that he's not ordaining just because he's sick and cannot get medicine as a layperson. Because in the Buddha's time, sick people were allowed to be ordained, but then some sick people misused it, and they ordained, they got treatment for free, and then they became lay people again. So in order to avoid misusing of the lay people's generosity, the Buddha has decided that sick people, such as those who have genital problems, like that they are not fully fledged men, or that they have epilepsy, and another requirements are related more to the social case. So to become a monk, one needs to get permission from their father and their mother if they are alive. If they are not alive, then it doesn't matter, but if they're alive, they need to give permission. They must not be a servant of the government, or they must be released. They must not be a slave, or if they are a slave, they must be released first before they are ordained. They must not be in debt. If they have any debt, they are not allowed to become monks. So some gentlemen would like to become monks, and they come to me and say, well, I have, how do you call it, hypothec? How do you call it? When you like buy a house but give money later, little by little? Mortgage? Yes. So what to do, if somebody has mortgage, can they become a monk? I suggest never take a mortgage. But if that is done already and there's no way out, then just get somebody else who you are familiar with and who believes you, or not necessarily believes you, somebody who you believe, and just ask them to take the mortgage on themselves, And you need to have an agreement. Okay, so now you will be responsible for my mortgage, and if I don't become a layperson, then you would pay the mortgage. And this would be for temporary ordination, especially, because usually people who have mortgage would not like to become monks for life anyway, or I never saw that such a case. Usually they'd like to become a monk for 10 days, 20 days, and then become lay people again. So in that case, they could take, their mother, father, or anybody else and say, okay, now I'm going to be a monk for 10, 20 days. So please just tell me that you are okay to take responsibility for my mortgage, then I can become a monk. And after 20 days, I will become a layperson. And of course, I will take care of all the paying. And this doesn't need to be written. Nobody cares. Actually, nobody cares at all. But if the monks ordain somebody who has a debt and the monks know that this person has a debt, then they have an offense. So better not have debt. So monks who follow rules, of course, will never ever ordain that kind of person. Now, I would suggest that this is very important. Because if the person becomes a monk and meditates and becomes fully enlightened, which is possible, then they will never disrobe, they will never become a layperson. It just doesn't exist in the world that a fully enlightened person would disrobe. So we need to turn it around and say, well, what if they become ordained with a debt? And the answer is, if they become ordained with a debt, they cannot attain the full enlightenment. Or that would be certain, because they would be thinking about repaying the debt. I have never heard a case of somebody who would have debt, be ordained, and then become fully enlightened. But all fully enlightened monks were free from debt when they were ordained. So even if my never doesn't work, even if there are exceptions, still it is more reliable if the person can, entrust their mortgage or whatever is the debt to somebody else and get ordained peacefully and be, and make it possible that they can become enlightened. There are 4 levels for enlightenment, and already at the first level of enlightenment, it seems as if you are going to become fully enlightened. Like you do not know that this is first level. First level of enlightenment involves of entirely abandoning all of you. So what is this you? You is this body, mind, whatever you know, whatever you have heard, whatever you think, whatever you believe, whatever other know about you, whatever you have, whatever you would like to have. All of this you is entirely, willingly abandoned for the first enlightenment. The first enlightenment doesn't arise without this abandoning. So it never happens the other way. First, there is full enlightenment of all of this I and me and mine. And then there is a possibility that the person can get the first level of enlightenment. And for the second, third, fourth levels, it's the same thing. So, in other words, if somebody has a debt, then obviously they will be thinking, I have a debt. I have to repay it. Now, if they think that they have a debt and they don't have to repay it, then that actually in our scriptures is akin to stealing. So, to me, logically, it just doesn't work, Either somebody has a debt and they think I need to repay it. When they repay or whether they repay doesn't matter. This is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the attitude to the debt. Like, I took this, I'm never going to repay it. It's mine, and I don't care that somebody else wants the money. Then this would be stealing in the Buddhist teachings. If somebody takes something for debt and they think, I would really love to repay it, but I can't. Even after 20, 30, 50 years, if they think just this and don't give anything, it still is not stealing, because the intention to repay is there. So of course this is very bad and it should never happen. We first of all should never become indebted. But if it already happened, then it's good to know that if you're indebted, you need to remember that you have a debt and that you need to repay it, and have there, some effort, some intention to repay it. And with that, if the person is ordained, then of course, how can they ever give up all of their ego, They are bound to this world by their duty to repay their debt. So this is one of the requirements. Then, when the person has correctly and truthfully answered all the questions satisfactorily, that means they got the permission from the parents, they have no debt at all, and they're not slaves or servants or government officials. They do not have any of the serious diseases, and they have complete genitals, and they have all the 4 requisites, the 3 kinds of robes and the bowl. Then the monks, 3 selected monks, will start to recite a decision. It's known as the motion. So the monks will start to recite the decision that this monk is ordained. And even before this, there's one more requirement, that there must be a teacher. But obviously, if there are 5 monks, one of them, if they have over 10 years of monkhood, they can be the teacher. So then the monk who has over 10 years of monkhood, they become the teacher. And then the decision involves the information that this is the monk, his name is like this, and this is his teacher, his name is like this, and the teacher is accepting this monk, and this monk is therefore ordained. And this is recited at least 3 times with as perfect pronunciation as possible. And then 4 main roles are explained to the new monk, and 4 requisites are explained. So 4 main rules are not killing, not stealing, not having sexual intercourse, and not telling lies about any attained psychic powers. So if the monk didn't attain them, then of course he must not say it, including concentration levels or enlightenment levels. And so these are the 4 main rules. They must never be broken, and therefore they are explained already right after ordination. So it cannot happen, that the new monk would break them. And then the 4 requisites. So the monk is reminded that his main requisites are the robes, the food, the place to stay, and medicine. So the monk needs to reflect on them and use them on his path, so he becomes enlightened as soon as possible. So these would be, in brief, the requirements and the procedure of becoming monk.